Disclaimer, this is not the Thaemine support guide that you want. This guide lays out my skill and build recommendations for supports going into Thaemine Hard and the first mode. Players going into normal mode can also refer to this guide, but note that it's primarily geared towards those going into hard mode and up. Use the recommendations as a framework to which you can make adjustments as you see fit, especially as you start feeling more comfortable about the raid as you gain more experience. You are welcome to disagree with the information presented, since there are multiple roads to success, and this video is just perhaps one of them. After all, it's just my opinion, so take it for what it's worth. To talk about my background, I've cleared Thaemine Hard Gates 1 to 3 on all 3 supports on a weekly basis for the past half year. Because of IRL constraints, I did not have the time to prog Gate 4 until recently, but I have finally managed to clear it multiple times on all 3 supports along with the first mode on Bard, so I will include my learnings from that. Now, to start off, let me touch upon the concept of floor value. I strongly recommend that you make choices that increase your floor value, which means that you anticipate the worst case scenarios and you make choices that increase your resilience to environmental factors and to your own mistakes. In other words, if something goes wrong, make it so that you can quickly dust it off and recover, or make it so that you can prevent the worst from happening in the first place. My recommendations in this video thus cater to floor value rather than ceiling, and this is precisely because of how difficult Thaemine can be. Now, you sure can make ceiling choices, that is up to you. However, venture at your own risk, because ceiling choices are usually made at the expense of a more solid floor. Bear in mind that in most cases, floor value equals real value, and this will especially be true in Thaemine. For players going into normal mode, following the information in this guide will allow for swift sail in your runs, but you do not have to play as much towards the floor. One key thing to mention is that supports should not die. As a wise man once said, it is your job not to die. A dead support means that attack buffs, yearning, and damage mitigation are all gone for the party, and this leads to half the group not being able to do their job, thus heavily tanking down your chances of clearing the raid. Of course, supports are naturally tankier than most DPSs, but everyone is susceptible to death in Thaemine, where anyone, even supports, can die by taking too much damage, even from the average pattern. Therefore, floor value on supports naturally incorporates the idea of helping them not die. Now, bearing these things in mind, let us dive into the specifics, starting with the basic setup for all 3 supports. For stats, I definitely recommend that you build full Swift with sub-spec. More swiftness means more attack speed and therefore less animation lock, which reduces the chance of skills being cancelled due to paralysis or push. You also get more cooldown reduction, which means if something goes wrong and a skill gets interrupted, you can quickly recover because it will come back off cooldown much faster. More cooldown reduction also means more shields, more DR, more space bars, and more utility in terms of counter, stagger, and destruction. All of the features that swiftness provides are highly valuable in Thaemine, so I strongly recommend that you build full Swift. Level 3 Yearning is a given for Relic set. For Elixirs, Luminary 40 set is the best because 5% cooldown reduction adds on to the benefits provided by Swiftness stat. Supports should also aim for level 5 on Order and Ally Enhancement lines to increase buff efficiency. Max HP is recommended on the chest piece since it increases efficiency of heals and shields while also making you yourself tankier. Otherwise, weapon attack and main stat lines increase buff efficiency as well, so the more the merrier, and stagger or MP related lines can also be helpful. For bracelets, Swift, Spec, Expose Weakness, Dagger, and Shear are the best options. Ideally, one support has Expose Weakness and the other has Dagger such that the raid group can benefit from both debuffs. Even more ideally, both supports also have Cheer such that the raid group can benefit from all options, but a bracelet like that is difficult to obtain, so compromise with what you have. For cards, Lost Wind Cliff is the best, since when paired up with Light of Salvation, the raid group unlocks the highest damage potential from cards, excluding the instance of Lasinith set. For gems, you should aim for a level 10 cooldown gem on the main buff skill, so Heavenly Tune, Heavenly Blessings, and Sunsketch. Then you should have level 9 plus for other buff and spam skills, and level 7 plus for non-spam skills as the bare minimum. For food, you should definitely prepare 24% mana food so that you can eliminate the risk of falling out of mana, although you can use lower ones as long as the out of mana risk is not present. You can try using the 12% mana food from the cooks at Erionor or Kalinar and see if that works for you. Let me stress this though, stop being El Cheapo. Take mana food. Now, let's talk about my recommendations for support engravings. For Paladin and Artist, I suggest that you run Class, Awakening, Expert, Vital Point Hit, Heavy Armor, and Crisis Vision as a +1. This build is a solid choice for Paladins and Artists for all 4 gates and for the first mode as well. Yes, Heavy Armor on Paladin. Trust me, I did not have a Heavy Armor build on any of my supports until last summer. However, Thaemine changed that. Granted, you can prog and beat the raid without heavy armor, but I will say, don't take the risk. Once you get comfortable with the raid, you can replace it with drops of ether, but at least for prog, just take heavy armor and don't look back. I would also argue that Magic Stream is not a good fit in Thaemine because of the abundance of chip damage and the necessity to tank a lot of patterns as a support. Note that in normal mode, you do not really have to take heavy armor, but I would still recommend taking Crisis Evasion at the very least. Another option is taking Heavy Armor 2 and Spirit Absorption 2, which puts you at attack speed cap and makes a noticeable difference in cast speed. But you have to relinquish the great luxury of Crisis Evasion, which I hold in high regard because it has saved me countless times. You can choose whichever build, but I really recommend the Crisis Evasion variant. Things are different for Bard because of the need for max MP increase. For gates 1 to 3, I recommend taking Heavy Armor and max MP increase and foregoing Vital Point Hit. Although there are many instances where additional stagger can come in handy, max MP and heavy armor are just so valuable. However, for Gate 4, Vital Point Hit is close to a necessity, and so it takes the place of max MP. I know removing max MP on Swift Bard sounds absurd, and I was skeptical myself at first, but it works in Gate 4 because you are taking Rhapsody and Buckshot or Soundholic, which are non-spam skills. Add 3-4 focus runes to the mix, and you actually do not run out of mana. This build is the consensus among Korean bards, and after conducting research and testing it out myself, I've concluded that it is the way to go, and I have indeed found success with it. The downside, however, is that you will likely have to buy accessories and maybe even carve a new stone, but I will assure you that it is worth. Now, let's take a look at Bard Tripods. A lot of the information here will be pretty evident for Bard players except for some aspects. I will not go over everything, so let me just highlight 3 things: brand choice, heavily tuned tripods, and guardian tuned tripods. For brand skills, the 3 options are Sound Shock, Sonatina, and Rhythm of Harp. You pick 2 out of the 3, and you can't really go wrong with whichever choice you make, although note that there are pros and cons with each combination. I tend to receive a lot of questions regarding brand skills, so let me provide an analysis for each of them. Sound Shock is a brand skill that packs great utility, featuring a 100% uptime potential, great stagger especially when paired with Overwhelm and Vital Point Hit, a moderate amount of gauge, easy management of luminary stacks, multi-hit for imprisoned teammates, and flexible rune pairings. It is easy to use with its succinct motion and long reach, the latter of which is especially great when you need to proc Yearning and apply branding from afar. With its 3-second cooldown and 5-second brand duration, Sound Shock is greatly resilient to raid variables, as in when the boss moves to the other side of the map, you can quickly catch up to it and renew the brand. On the flip side, it is a spammy skill, and so it eats up a lot of mana and can get in the way of rotations if you're not used to it, and you do have to aim it properly, so it can be burdensome to use. Sonatina is a great backup brand skill. You cannot reach 100% uptime with it alone, but it packs great benefits in 1 destruction point, some stagger, and tons of gauge. It is easy to use and pairs well with either Sound Shock or Harp. Note that it does drain a lot of mana. Harp of Rhythm is a great choice for easy branding and features 100% brand uptime potential and decent range coverage. It pairs well with CNJ if you are a fan of that. One great aspect is that it provides you with a small amount of gauge over time, regardless of whether you're hitting something with it, which especially comes in handy during stages where you cannot build gauge otherwise. There are certain issues with this skill. It can get cancelled mid-cast, it lacks utility, and if the boss moves far away from it, then you could suffer an uptime. Still, it is a great brand choice, especially when backed up by another one. Note that the meter gain does not scale with spec or other sources of meter increase. Now, looking at each brand combination, Sound Shock plus Sonatina is tons of utility but is quite demanding in workload. Harp plus Sonatina is easy to use but it lacks the utility of Sound Shock. Sound Shock plus Harp is the highest brand uptime potential but falls flat in the meter department. My personal recommendation is Sound Shock plus Sonatina, but any of the 3 combinations work. Note that in Gate 4 you will likely have to rely rely on a single brand setup with Soundshock. For Heavenly Tune, notice that my recommendation is Courageous Tune on the second line of tripods. This tripod is plain overpowered. It provides a whooping 35% damage reduction with up to a 70% uptime. The killer part is that it applies not only to the Bard's Party, but also to the entire raid group, similar to how Dagger and Exposed Weakness on bracelets function. You might have been accustomed to taking Tough Tune until now, but Courageous Tune just holds so much value in Thaemine, where patterns hurt a lot. Next is Guardian Tune tripods, which is a topic that can stir a debate. My recommendation is Tenacity, Endless Protection, Wind of Protection. Push immunity is just so valuable, especially on such an important skill. Endless Protection allows Guardian Tune to provide some form of damage mitigation, whether it is DR or shield, for a duration of 16 seconds, which is insane value for a simple button press of a skill. Wind of Protection is particularly valuable in gates 2 and 4 of Thaemine. In gate 2, electricity is better prevented than cleansed, and in gate 4, there are earthquake CCs that cannot be cleansed, but can be prevented. If you thought that Bard sucks because of no cleanse, Thaemine Gate 4 will prove you wrong. About agile defense, I know that there are bards who enjoy using this tripod. However, the way I see it, it is double the mana cost, double the motion lock, and double the effort for the same duration of damage mitigation. On paper, there is a great appeal to it, as you can maintain 100% uptime on shield when using it in tandem with Wind of Music, but I find that appeal to be situational, as it is hard to actualize in hectic situations. If I were to use it, I know I would likely suffer in terms of uptime, but that is perhaps just me, and if you feel that you can draw the value out of this tripod, then by all means do take it in gates 1 and 3, but not in gates 2 and 4, where CC block is overpowered. Now, for skill choices on Bard for each gate, note that for gates 1 to 3, you can take whichever 2 brands you want, and Soundshock and Sonatina are only there as placeholders. Also, rune choice is somewhat flexible, and you can check the previous slide for recommended options. I am personally not a fan of CNJ on any of my supports, but if you like using it, feel free to do so in gates 1 to 3. For gate 4, Soundshock with Overwhelm is just too valuable. To explain the reasoning behind some of these choices, for gates 1 to 3, 2 brands and 5 core skills are locked, which leaves 1 skill as flex. For gate 1, I would take Buckshot to help with the counters. They happen so often, and relying on just Prelude will pose a challenge. Rhapsody can also be considered in order to reduce risk in some of the rare patterns and the 35-line mech. For gate 2, Rhapsody is useful throughout the gate to save partymates from explosion damage and for you to not get knocked off from the platform. You don't really need Buckshot since the 135-line counter mech can be dealt with using Prelude, and failing other counters is not a big deal. For gate 3, Rhapsody is your lifeline for mitigating all sorts of damage and for backup push immunity. You will need to equip Purify Rune somewhere, and while I have it on Sonic Vibration, you can also put it on Soundshock, Harp, or Guardian Tune. For gate 4, the popular setup is to run single brand Soundshock. This is because Rhapsody is mandatory and Rhythm Buckshot or Soundholic is more valuable than a backup brand. Soundshock is the go-to brand because of uptime, stagger, and multi-hit, which are all indispensable in gate 4. As for whether to take Buckshot or Soundholic, in hard mode you can change skills at the workshop before entering 4-2. So the play is to take Buckshot in 4-1 to deal with the co-op sword counter, and then before entering 4-2, switch to Soundholic to deal with the 210-line mech and the 4-3 sudden grab. In the first mode, if your party has chosen not to deal with the 4-2 210-line stagger check, which is the popular strat, Buckshot will be the better choice, especially because the 4-1 88-line counter can be difficult to deal with using Prelude. If you are doing the 4-2 210-line stagger check, then Soundholic will be the better choice unless you have a stagger bot gun answer. Since you're not taking max MP increase, you might run out of mana with a 3 focus rune setup, in which case you can consider adding a 4th one to Rhapsody or even Heavenly Tune. Now, moving on to Paladin Tripods, starting with brand choice. I've always loved using Light Shock for its ease of use and how it pairs so well with quick recharge. Most of all, it has innate process immunity, which can be capitalized on to maintain positioning and to reliably apply branding. However, it is a spam skill that you have to use every 4 seconds. Sword of Justice is also a great option because of its long reach, short cooldown, and brand duration. The downside is that it has a slight delay in application, and because of its lack of process immunity, it can be cancelled mid-cast. Although I myself have sworn allegiance to Light Shock, feel free to pick Sword of Justice if that fits your preferences more. For Holy Protection, the second line tripods are all good choices depending on the situation. Purify is the go-to if you need a cleanse, so in gates 2, 3, and 4-1. Lingering Power is a great choice if you don't need a cleanse since it is longer uptime on the shield. Robust Protection is a great choice when you know the raid well and you know which damage patterns to mitigate. For God's Decree, I must stress that you should not take the brand tripod. Really, just don't. Also, you don't want to constrict the skill's usage, so I advise not to equip CNJ. One clever thing I've seen high-profile paladins do is to equip Quick Recharge on God's Decree, and I think it is a good idea for the occasional cooldown reduction, as protection and wealth generally do not provide much value. I included Holy Area to the list, but it is an awkward choice, since in order to take it, you need to either remove Light of Judgment or one of the blue skills. Technically, the identity gain potential on it is on par with Light of Judgment, but you need to hit full ticks for that to be true. The DR component looks nice on paper, especially since you can apply it with close to full uptime, but it is redundant with other sources of DR in Heavenly Blessings, Holy Aura, and God's Decree. It is a skill that you can consider, but it is indeed awkward to take in most scenarios. For Executor's Sword, you can definitely take Weak Point Enhancement on the second line for Gate 1, although the difference is not too noticeable. In all other gates, you should take Breath Control for reduced skill motion. On the third line, both options make sense, but I would prioritize Broad Slash since it allows counters to land from an angle. For Holy Sword, you can take Overwhelm for more stagger or Gale Wind to reduce skill motion. One thing I've seen paladins do is to use Holy Sword to proc CNJ, which I think is a good idea if you want to include CNJ in your build. Execution of Justice is for Gate 3 because paladin has limited ways to obtain push immunity, and you need it quite often in that gate. You can get a shield from the first line tripod, so Iron Wall is a good fit. Based on these explanations, here are the skills and tripods for each gate. You can of course take Sword of Justice instead of Light Shock based on your preferences. Holy Protection second line tripods are switched based on the need for cleanse. In Gate 3, you will take Execution of Justice for push immunity and equip a Purify rune to readily cleanse darkness stacks. Once you become experienced, you will not have to rely on Purify, but I highly recommend taking it while learning the gate. Executor's Sword is recommended over Holy Sword because the sword counter is tricky to deal with due to sudden aggro switch. In Gate 4, prioritize Overwhelm runes on blue skills for more stagger. Let's move on to Artists, starting with Tripod Commentary. First is Drawing Orchids. On the third line, take Faraway Journey instead of Flowery Path. More reach, more width, easier branding, and more party mates can profit from the 8% attack speed. 30% movement speed sounds great, but the benefits from Faraway Journey generally outweigh that. On Sunsketch, prioritize Robust Protection over Agile Strokes on the second line. The attack speed increase is valuable, but arguably, throughout Thaemine, the additional DR will be even more valuable. On Sunwell, on the second line, take MP Recovery in most cases, and consider taking Ink Shield if your party does not lack mana, or they are boundless mana DPSs. For Hopper, I personally recommend taking Gale Wind instead of Wealth in order to reduce the duration of animation lock. On Artist, the biggest difficulty is playing around the animation lock, and Hopper is the standout culprit. Although Wealth is a great choice to capitalize on the meter gain, Galewind is the play if you want to reduce risk. For Starry Night, on the first line, take Wide Angle Attack over Energy Enhancement. Starry Night is first and foremost a damage mitigation skill, and the extra range allows you to protect party mates with more ease, especially since the effect centers around your character, unlike the more ranged options on the other supports. It is also difficult to capitalize on its meter potential because you have to do a prolonged cast to fully benefit from it. Realistically, you will often be cutting it short to maintain buff uptime or deal with other tasks. For Pouncing Tiger, make sure to leave the skill at level 7 for reduced mana cost. The third line tripods do not make the skill better, and 2 Tigers actually makes it worse by splitting the stagger and meter gain. Use Wealth over Overwhelm because the meter gain from this skill is immense. On Illusion Illusion Door, all of the first line tripods are valid choices, with my preference being Brutal Honesty to eliminate the risk of the skill being cancelled due to paralysis. Note that Illusion Door is a skill that provides great value through shields, cleanse, meter, and teleportation, but if the raid puts an emphasis on stagger and does not require cleansing, then this skill will be outshined by other choices. This is a common question that I get from viewers. Why don't you take Illusion Door? The answer is that I will take it depending on what the raid requires me to take, and I need to stay flexible with my choices. Now, upward stroke versus one stroke. Personally, I love the long range on one stroke, and I will use this skill whenever I can. Sadly, Thaemine favors the use of upward stroke because it is a slightly faster counter and it has push immunity. Still, in Gate 1, there is room for one stroke because the long reach allows you to land a lot of the counters with ease. On all other gates, upward stroke will be the better choice. Here are the skill recommendations for each gate. Again, use this as a framework and feel free to make adjustments as you see fit. For Gate 1, you can take Sprinkle instead of Illusion Door if you feel like your party is having a rough time and could use the extra shielding. For Gate 3, you should consider equipping Purify on Sunwell until you feel comfortable cleansing the darkness stacks with Illusion Door. In Gate 4-1, Illusion Door allows you to cleanse the backstep Earthquake, and this will come in handy especially during Prog. However, in order to clear the raid, all raid members will have to learn how to avoid getting hit by it entirely, and so the more the group is experienced, the fewer cleanse angles you should be seeing, and in that case taking Sprinkle for more shields and stagger should be considered. In Gate 4-2, Sprinkle takes the slot of Illusion Door because stagger is important, and there is nothing much to cleanse. This marks the end of the support build guide for Thaemine. It is a lot of information, and again, it is probably not the Thaemine support guide that you wanted, but I hope you'll find it useful as you get to experience the raid, and I hope everything was relayed in a cohesive and coherent way. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on stream, and if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for watching, I wish you Godspeed in Thaemine, and I will see you in the next video.